The PlayStation had many futuristic themed games released during its lifespan, many of which would revolve around different types of genre-specific elements, from racing games to arena shooters, even fighting games, mech combat games to name but a few. So there was a load of different ideas that went into many of these concepts. Some of them would be successful, highly successful in fact, that would spawn many sequels to go on to be legendary series in their own right, that would span a multitude of later consoles. But there are those that presented good ideas on paper but just wouldn't be executed in the same way when come to final production. But that's not to say that they're bad games. They do have some quirky elements in their own right that do appeal with various characteristics that do stand out compared to everything else that's out there, but in many cases just isn't polished enough in order for it to become iconic. So in most cases, many of these games are left either undiscovered or just left to fall into obscurity. And one of the games that falls into this category would be Dodgem Arena, that was released on the PlayStation in 1998, and the game acts as a multitude of different varieties. It ranges from an action, racing, driving sports game to an arena kind of shooter, combat game. So there's a lot of different intricacies and elements based around what it's trying to do. It takes elements from games the likes of Wipeout, but also takes other elements from games like Twisted Metal and other variants of it, where it tries to mix arena-based shooting and combat elements with futuristic tones and themes. Essentially, it's a sci-fi futuristic themed arena shooter in many ways. So the game takes place in 2049 AD, and the plot revolves around an elite racing league or racing combat league, where your goal is to compete against opponents in big interactive arenas, where you have to defeat opponents using a variety of different power-ups, weapons, but you also have to, kind of like you're playing ice hockey, but in a more futuristic type of vibe, where you get like a selection of pucks that you'll find scattered throughout the arena, and your goal is to pick them up and to score in the opposite goal at the end of each section. But you will also have to compete against a multitude of other players that are also trying to do the same thing, and their goal is also to try and take you out if and when possible. And that's where it comes back to, on paper the idea is good, but in theory the execution isn't as well established when it comes to the practical elements, because yes, the game does have a multiplayer mode where you can play either 1 to 2 or even 4 players if you've a PlayStation multitap, which is the game's highlight and it's its best feature. But it's just, there's so many elements of the game that could have been improved, because the combat elements do work, but the control features of each of the vehicles, that's where the game is really let down, because it is very fast paced, but the movement and the controls are so twitchy and cumbersome that you don't really know what you're doing, and it's very, very hard to maneuver or steer the ship in any real direction that you want it to go in, because it's literally all over the place. And because everything is moving so fast, it makes that even more of a challenge. It actually becomes more frustrating than enjoyable, and it is very reflective in its reviews that it got in the magazines. That was definitely one of the major gripes that people had with the game. Plus as well, if you're an absolute beginner coming into this, everything that I've just described and how you play the game, it's not apparent from the get-go on exactly what it is that you're supposed to do. If you've ever watched advertisements or even the intro sequence to the game, it looks like just a combat arena based shooter where you have to avoid and eliminate opponents, but it doesn't exactly tell you all of the other elements that you need to do as well. And there's very little in terms of guides or helpful resources that really explain the game to a degree that makes it understandable. Even from my first experience playing the game, I will admit I hadn't a clue what was going on in the game, to be honest. It wasn't until I looked back on later forums, when I went on to like Reddit and I went on to other game websites, that I kind of gave you a breakdown of what it is that you're supposed to do. But even at that, there's very little information available online. You will have to go and dive to try and find it, which will be tough if you're not really sure what to look for, and that's where the confusing elements come in with the game. Like, it does have some really cool ideas in what it's trying to do. Like, it does have some really cool fast-paced elements. Mind you, it's very tricky to control. The graphics on the game are really good, very detailed. It really suits the futuristic vibe that it's going for. The arenas are massive, and if you can really get to grips with the controls, and especially if you're playing it with your mates, that would definitely be the best way to play it, because playing it in a single player experience, there's just so so much going on that it's so confusing that it actually becomes not even enjoyable anymore. And that's what I quickly found. So after a while I was kind of like, no, I'm not really getting to grips with this. Now I suppose if I put more time into it, then yeah, I probably could get something out of it, but I will be honest, it's very, very tricky. The controls are just too fiddly and too sensitive for them to be usable and even enjoyable, and that's where you will have an issue with trying to understand how to even play the game. But the one thing I do like about it is the fact is that it takes elements from all other games or popular games like Wipeout, Twisted Metal, and tries to combine it into its own style, and it does a good job in doing that. But it's just the control systems and just how the game is supposed to play. If it was better planned out and if the control system was better, I genuinely think that this would have been a better game. But it does have its quirks, like there is pros and cons to everything, and that's why I always say I don't like completely hating on games, because even the bad games or the games that aren't as good or even the lesser known titles, there is always something in them that does stand out. There's always something there that's different from what else that's in the same category pretty much, and this game does present a lot of those quirks. It does have some nice visuals. Again, the arenas are really good. The pacing of the game, it is super fast, mind you, really tough to control, so it has a lot of promise, but it just could have been better executed. But at the same time, there are people out there that would have grown up with this game. There are people out there that would have enjoyed playing this. Make no mistake about that. It would have appealed to a select group of players. Every game on the PlayStation had an audience of some kind, and at the same time it also represented a truly experimental period in video games. Developers were given the full reins to literally just go nuts and try different things, to take elements of what was popular and just try to put their own spin on it. And you know what, they were quite within their right to do so, right? Some of the ideas may not have panned out the way you would have expected, but that's not to say that it wasn't worth a try. These games represent that period, that it was worth a try to give them a go at least, to see how they fared out. Like, it's not to say that it's a bad title, but it's not the best on the PlayStation. There are better variants of it out there, but it is one to look into if you like the more futuristic themed elements of games. This definitely has that in abundance. But I would love to know your thoughts of Dodgeball Arena for the PlayStation, if you have played this yourself, or if you've played any game similar to it, and do you like the futuristic vibe and themes that this game goes for? So be sure to share it down in the comments below. And if you would like to see more content around other types of futuristic themed games that were also released on the PlayStation, even other videos that I have covered on the channel previously, you can check out the videos on screen to see more of those games in action. And as always, keep those gaming memories alive.